The dust storm had been rolling across the plains for 3 days straight. Jake Thornton pulled his bandana higher over his nose and squinted through the brown haze that turned midday into twilight. His horse, an old gray mare named Silver, picked her way carefully through the rocks and scrub brush. They were heading back to the ranch after checking the fence lines on the eastern pasture. The wind howled like a living thing, pushing against them with invisible hands. Jake had lived in this harsh land for 32 years. He knew its moods and its dangers. He respected the power of nature and never took foolish risks. But he also knew that sometimes the desert surprised you in ways you could never expect. This was one of those times. Through the screaming wind, he heard something else, a sound that did not belong. It was high-pitched and desperate, cutting through the storm like a knife. Jake pulled on the reins and Silver stopped, her ears twitching. The sound came again. It was not the cry of a coyote or the screech of a hawk. It was something different, something that made his chest tighten with an emotion he could not name. He dismounted and wrapped Silver's reins around a sturdy piece of deadwood. The sound was coming from behind a cluster of red rocks about 20 yards away. Jake moved toward it, one hand on his hat to keep it from flying away. The wind tried to push him back, but he leaned into it and kept going. When he rounded the rocks, he stopped dead in his tracks. In a small hollow protected from the worst of the wind, something moved. At first, Jake thought it might be a lizard or a small bird, but as he got closer, he realized it was neither. The creature was about the size of a large cat, with scales that shimmered even in the dull light. It had 4 legs, a long tail, and 2 small wings folded against its sides. Its head was triangular with large eyes that looked up at Jake with desperate hope. A dragon. A baby dragon. Jake had heard stories all his life. Tales told around campfires and in dusty saloons. Most folks said dragons were just legends, fairy tales for children. But a few old-timers swore they had seen them in the mountains, flying high above the peaks where humans rarely ventured. Jake had always been skeptical. Now, looking down at this impossible creature, he felt his entire understanding of the world shift. The baby dragon opened its mouth and made that sound again. It was calling out, Jake realized, calling for its mother. The creature was covered in dust and looked weak. One of its wings hung at an odd angle, possibly injured. Its scales, which should have gleamed, were dull and dirty. The dragon tried to stand but collapsed back onto the ground. Jake knelt down slowly. He had always been good with animals. Horses, cattle, even wild creatures sometimes responded to his calm presence. He held out his hand, palm down, and spoke in a low, soothing voice. "Easy there, little one. Easy now. I am not going to hurt you." The dragon watched him with intelligent eyes. It sniffed at his hand, and Jake felt warm breath against his skin. Then, in a gesture that surprised him, the creature pressed its snout against his palm. It made a softer sound now, not a cry but something closer to a whimper. "Where is your mama?" Jake asked, looking around. The sky was empty except for dust. "She leave you here?" The dragon whimpered again and tried once more to stand. This time Jake could see the problem clearly. Its left wing was definitely hurt, bent in a way that was not natural. The creature must have fallen or been blown down by the storm. It was alone, injured, and scared. Jake made a decision. He could not leave the dragon here to die. It went against everything he believed in. Out here on the frontier, you helped those who needed help. It did not matter if they were human or animal or something in between. If something was suffering and you had the power to ease that suffering, you did it. That was the code Jake lived by. He took off his jacket and wrapped it carefully around the dragon. The creature did not resist. It seemed to understand that Jake was trying to help. When he lifted it, he was surprised by how light it was. The dragon's body trembled against his chest. Jake could feel its heart beating fast, like a trapped bird. "I got you now," he said. "You are going to be all right." Getting back to Silver was harder with his arms full. The wind seemed even stronger now, as if angry that Jake had found the dragon. But he made it to his horse and managed to mount while holding the bundled creature. Silver snorted and danced sideways, nervous about the strange passenger, but Jake calmed her with soft words. The ride back to the ranch took twice as long as usual. Jake had to be careful not to jostle the injured dragon too much. By the time he saw the buildings in the distance, his arms were aching and his back was sore, but he did not complain. The dragon had fallen asleep against him, its breathing slow and steady now that it felt safe. His ranch was small but well maintained. A house with a covered porch, a barn, a chicken coop, and a few other outbuildings. Jake had built most of it himself over the years. It was not fancy, but it was home. He rode straight to the barn and dismounted carefully. Inside, the air was calmer. The barn smelled of hay and horses and leather. It was a good smell, a comforting smell. Jake carried the dragon to an empty stall in the back, where he sometimes kept sick animals. He had blankets there and some old cushions. He made a nest of sorts and laid the dragon down gently. In the better light of the barn, he could see the creature more clearly. Its scales were a deep bronze color with hints of gold. The wings, though one was injured, were a darker shade like aged copper. The dragon's claws were black and sharp. Its eyes, now that they were not filled with panic, were a brilliant amber color. Jake examined the injured wing as gently as he could. The dragon flinched, but did not try to bite or scratch him. It seemed to trust him, which was remarkable given they had just met. The wing was not broken, Jake decided, but badly sprained. He had treated similar injuries in birds before. He would need to splint it and give the wing time to heal. First, though, the dragon needed water and food. Jake filled a shallow bowl with clean water and set it near the creature's head. The dragon sniffed it, then began to lap at it eagerly. Its tongue was forked like a snake's. Jake watched, fascinated despite himself. Food was trickier. What did baby dragons eat? Jake had no idea. He tried offering bits of dried beef, some grain, even an apple. The dragon sniffed each item, but showed no interest. Finally, Jake remembered the raw chicken in his cold box. He brought a piece to the barn, and the dragon's reaction was immediate. Its eyes brightened, and it made an excited chirping sound. Jake cut the chicken into small pieces, and the dragon ate them eagerly. It must have been starving, Jake thought. How long had it been out there alone? The dragon ate until the chicken was gone, then looked up at Jake as if asking for more. He chuckled and patted its head carefully. "That is enough for now. You will make yourself sick if you eat too much at once." The dragon seemed to understand. It settled down onto the blankets and closed its eyes. Within moments, it was asleep again. Jake sat there for a while, just watching. His mind was spinning with questions. Where had the dragon come from? Why had its mother left it? Were there more dragons out there? And most importantly, what was he going to do now? He could not keep a dragon's secret forever. But he also knew that if word got out, people would come. Hunters, scientists, curiosity seekers. They would want to take the dragon away, study it, maybe hurt it. Jake had seen how humans treated things they did not understand. He had seen cruelty and greed too many times in his life. This creature deserved better than that. For now, he would keep the dragon safe and help it heal. After that, well, he would figure it out when the time came. That was how he approached most problems in life. One day at a time, one step at a time. Jake stood and stretched his stiff back. He needed to tend to Silver and get himself some food too. But he would check on the dragon regularly through the night. He had made a promise when he picked up that frightened creature in the dust storm. He had promised to help, and Jake Thornton always kept his promises. As he left the barn, he looked up at the sky. The storm was finally starting to break. Patches of blue showed between the clouds. The wind had died down to a gentle breeze. It felt like a good sign, though Jake was not a superstitious man. Still, he hoped it meant that better days were coming for both him and his unexpected guest. That night, Jake sat on his porch with a cup of coffee and thought about all the stories he had heard over the years. Dragons were supposed to be fierce and dangerous, breathing fire and hoarding gold. But the creature in his barn was just a frightened baby that needed help. Maybe the stories had it all wrong. Or maybe, like most young things, dragons had to learn to be fierce. Right now, this one just needed someone to care for it. Jake finished his coffee and went inside. He would sleep lightly tonight, ready to wake if the dragon needed him. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. He would have to make a proper splint for that wing and figure out what else baby dragons needed to thrive. But those were tomorrow's problems. For tonight, both he and the dragon would rest. The next morning arrived with clear skies and bright sunshine. Jake woke early as always and immediately went to check on his unusual patient. The dragon was awake, its amber eyes following him as he entered the stall. It made a soft, trilling sound that might have been a greeting. Jake smiled and knelt down beside it. "Morning to you too," he said. "How are you feeling today?" The dragon stretched carefully, mindful of its injured wing. It seemed stronger than yesterday, which was a good sign. Jake had brought more raw chicken, and the dragon ate enthusiastically. While it ate, Jake prepared materials for a splint. He had some thin wooden slats and soft cloth that should work. Getting the splint on was not easy. The dragon did not like having its wing handled, even though Jake was as gentle as possible. It squirmed and made unhappy sounds, but Jake talked to it the whole time in that same calm voice he used with horses. "I know it hurts. I know you do not like this, but we have to do it so your wing can heal properly. You want to fly again someday, do not you?" The dragon seemed to settle at the mention of flying. Maybe it understood more than Jake thought, or maybe his tone was just soothing enough to calm the creature. Either way, Jake managed to get the splint in place. He wrapped it securely, but not too tightly. The wing was now held in a natural position where it could heal without being moved around. "There," Jake said, sitting back. "All done. You did good." The dragon inspected the splint with obvious displeasure, but did not try to remove it. Instead, it looked at Jake and made that trilling sound again. Then it did something that surprised him. It hobbled forward on 3 legs in its good wing and pressed its head against Jake's chest. Jake felt something warm bloom in his heart. He reached out carefully and stroked the dragon's head. The scales felt smooth and warm under his fingers. "You are welcome," he said softly. Over the next few days, a routine developed. Jake would wake up early and go straight to the barn. The dragon always seemed excited to see him, making happy sounds and moving around its stall as much as it could with the splint. Jake would bring food and fresh water. He cleaned the stall daily, keeping everything as comfortable as possible. The dragon was growing fast. By the end of the first week, it was noticeably larger. Its scales were brighter now that it was healthy and well-fed. Its amber eyes were alert and curious about everything. Jake spent hours in the barn, just sitting with the dragon and talking to it. He told it about the ranch, about his life, about the wide world beyond these plains. Sometimes he wondered if he was going crazy, talking to a dragon like it was a person. But the dragon seemed to listen. It would tilt its head and watch him with those intelligent eyes. Sometimes it would make soft sounds, as if responding. Jake found himself looking forward to these conversations more than he wanted to admit. Living alone for so many years had been lonely, though he rarely acknowledged it, even to himself. By the second week, the dragon was definitely growing attached to him. It would get agitated if Jake left the barn for too long. When he returned, it would make excited sounds and try to nuzzle him. Jake found himself spending more and more time in the barn and less time on ranch work. His chores were starting to pile up, but he did not care. The dragon needed him. He started letting the dragon out of the stall to move around the barn. It was getting too big to be confined in such a small space. With the splint on, it could not fly, but it could walk and climb. The dragon loved exploring. It sniffed at everything, investigated every corner. It was especially fascinated by Jake's tools, though he had to stop it from chewing on several of them. One afternoon, Jake was mending a saddle while the dragon napped nearby. He heard hoofbeats outside and looked up in alarm. Visitors were rare out here, and he was not expecting anyone. He quickly herded the dragon back into its stall and closed the door. "Stay quiet," he whispered. The dragon seemed to sense his worry and settled down without protest. Jake walked out of the barn to see his neighbor, old Tom Fletcher, dismounting from a dusty horse. Tom owned the property to the south and occasionally stopped by to trade news and supplies. He was a good man, honest and hardworking, but Jake did not want anyone knowing about the dragon yet. "Jake," Tom called out, waving. "Thought I would check in. That storm was a mean one. You come through all right?" "Fine, Tom. No damage to speak of. How about you?" They talked for a while about the storm, about cattle prices, about the upcoming county fair. Jake was friendly, but not inviting. He did not ask Tom to stay for coffee or come see the barn. Tom seemed to sense that Jake was busy and did not linger long. After Tom rode away, Jake breathed a sigh of relief. That had been close. He went back to the barn and found the dragon peering over the stall door, watching him with what looked like concern. "It is all right," Jake said. "That was just a neighbor, but we need to be careful. Not everyone would understand about you." The dragon made a low sound that might have been agreement. Jake opened the stall door and the dragon came out, immediately moving to his side. It had started following him around like a puppy whenever it was out of the stall. Jake found this both endearing and slightly inconvenient when he was trying to work. That night, Jake lay in bed and thought seriously about the situation. The dragon was getting bigger every day. Soon it would be too large to hide in the barn. And what about when its wing healed? It would want to fly, to be free. Could he really keep it here forever? Should he? But the alternative was letting it go, and Jake was not sure the dragon was ready for that. It was still young, still vulnerable. And what about its mother? She had never come looking for her baby. Maybe she could not. Maybe she was dead. Or maybe dragons did not care for their young the way other animals did. Jake had no way of knowing. He decided to take things one day at a time. For now, the dragon needed him, and he would be there. When the time came to make other decisions, he would face them. That was all he could do. The days turned into weeks. Jake removed the splint after 15 days, and the dragon's wing appeared to be healed. It stretched it carefully at first, then with more confidence. Soon it was flapping both wings, creating gusts of wind that stirred up hay and dust in the barn. Jake watched with mixed emotions. He was happy the dragon was healthy again, but he also knew this meant change was coming. The dragon was now the size of a large dog, too big to pick up easily anymore. Its scales had deepened in color to a rich bronze that gleamed in the sunlight. Its wings, when fully extended, were impressive and beautiful. The creature was becoming magnificent before Jake's eyes. One morning, Jake woke to find the barn door open. His heart jumped into his throat. He ran outside in his bare feet and looked around frantically. Then he heard a sound above him and looked up. The dragon was on the roof of the barn, its wings spread wide, facing the rising sun. "Hey!" Jake called. "Get down from there before you fall." The dragon looked down at him and made a sound that could only be described as joyful. Then it jumped. Jake's heart stopped, but the dragon did not fall. Its wings caught the air, and it glided down in a graceful arc, landing in the yard with only a slight stumble. It had flown. Not far or high, but it had flown. The dragon ran to Jake, prancing and making excited sounds. Jake could not help but smile despite his fear. "You gave me a heart attack," he said, but he was patting the dragon's head as he said it. "But I am proud of you. Your wing is all better." Over the next few days, the dragon practiced flying constantly. It would launch itself from the barn roof, from the fence posts, from anywhere it could climb to. Its flights got longer and higher each time. Jake watched with a mixture of pride and sadness. He knew what this meant. The dragon was ready to leave. It could survive on its own now. But the dragon showed no signs of wanting to leave. Every night it returned to the barn. Every morning it greeted Jake with enthusiasm. It still followed him around during the day, though now sometimes it would fly circles above him instead of walking beside him. Jake tried to convince himself this could continue forever, but deep down he knew better. The decision was made for him on a hot afternoon in late summer. Jake was working on fixing a section of fence when he heard the dragon make a sound he had never heard before. It was loud and urgent, almost a roar. He dropped his tools and ran toward the sound. He found the dragon in the yard, standing rigid and staring at the sky. Jake looked up and saw what had caught its attention. High above, so high they were almost invisible, two shapes circled. They were larger than his dragon, much larger. Even from this distance, Jake could see the sunlight glinting off scales. Dragons, adult dragons, and the baby in his yard was calling to them. The two shapes circled lower. They were coming down. Jake felt a complex tangle of emotions. Fear, certainly. These were wild creatures, and he had no idea how they would react to finding a human with one of their young. But also relief. Maybe these were the baby's parents. Maybe the mother had been searching all this time. The two dragons landed in the field beyond the fence with impacts that shook the ground. They were enormous, each easily the size of a covered wagon. One was bronze like Jake's dragon, but darker and scarred from age. The other was a deep red like rust. Both had eyes that glowed with fierce intelligence. The baby dragon jumped the fence, something Jake had not known it could do. It ran toward the two adults, crying out. The bronze dragon, the mother Jake assumed, lowered her massive head and sniffed her offspring. She made a deep, rumbling sound. The baby pressed against her, making those trilling sounds Jake had come to know so well. Jake stood frozen on his side of the fence. He wanted to run, but felt that would be a mistake. The mother dragon was looking at him now. Her eyes were the same amber color as her baby's, but much more intense. He felt pinned by that gaze, unable to move. Then the mother dragon did something unexpected. She lowered her head in what could only be a bow. The red dragon beside her did the same. Jake, operating on instinct more than thought, bowed back. It seemed like the right thing to do. The mother dragon made a sound, softer than he expected from such a large creature. The baby responded, making sounds and moving between its mother and Jake as if trying to communicate. Jake had the distinct impression the baby was telling its mother about what had happened, about how Jake had found it and helped it. The idea that dragons could communicate so complexly was astounding. But then again, everything about the last few weeks had been astounding. The mother dragon studied Jake for a long moment. Then she spread her wings. The red dragon did the same. The baby looked back at Jake one last time. It made a sound that was unmistakably sad. Jake felt his throat tighten. "Go on," he called out. "Go with your mama. That is where you belong." The baby hesitated, then ran back to the fence. It could not get over it easily from this side, so Jake opened the gate and walked through. The dragon came right to him and pressed its head against his chest one final time. Jake hugged it, not caring how strange that might look to the adult dragons watching. "You take care of yourself," he said quietly. "Fly high, be free, and maybe if you are ever in these parts again, you stop by and say hello." The dragon pulled back and looked at him with those amber eyes. Jake could have sworn he saw understanding there, even gratitude. Then the dragon turned and went to its mother. The three dragons crouched, then launched themselves into the air with powerful beats of their wings. Jake watched them rise higher and higher, circling the ranch once. The baby did a loop, showing off its healed wing. Then the three dragons turned north and flew away. They became smaller and smaller until they were just dots against the clouds, and then they were gone entirely. Jake stood there for a long time after they disappeared. The ranch felt very quiet suddenly, very empty. He realized he had gotten used to having the dragon around, to its sounds and its presence. Now it was gone, and he was alone again. He felt the weight of that loneliness more heavily than he had in years. But as he walked back to the barn, he also felt something else. Pride. He had saved that baby dragon's life. He had helped it heal and grow strong. And he had let it go when the time was right, even though part of him had wanted to keep it. That was the hardest part of love, Jake thought, knowing when to hold on and when to let go. The barn seemed very empty that night. Jake cleaned out the stall where the dragon had stayed, folding the blankets and putting things back in order. He found one of the dragon's shed scales on the ground, about the size of his palm. He picked it up carefully. It was beautiful, gleaming bronze with hints of gold. He would keep it, he decided, as a reminder of the most extraordinary few weeks of his life. The next few days were hard. Jake threw himself into ranch work, trying not to think about the dragon. But everything reminded him. The empty barn, the sky above, even the chickens seemed to notice something was different. They had gotten used to the dragon's presence too, though they had never quite trusted it. Tom Fletcher stopped by again about a week later. He sat on the porch with Jake, drinking coffee as the sun set. "You seem different," Tom observed. "Something happened?" Jake almost told him. The words were right there, wanting to come out, but in the end, he just shook his head. "Just been working too hard, I guess. Need to remember to rest now and then." Tom nodded sagely. "That is the truth. A man can work himself to death out here if he is not careful." They sat in companionable silence for a while, watching the sky turn orange and purple. After Tom left, Jake stayed on the porch long after dark. The stars came out, brighter than anywhere else he had ever been. He wondered where the dragons were now. He hoped they were safe, that the baby was learning to hunt and fly and do all the things dragons did. He hoped it was happy. 3 months passed. Summer turned to fall, and the air grew cooler. Jake's life returned to its normal routine. He fixed fences and tended cattle and did all the ordinary tasks that ranching required. But he was not quite the same man he had been before the dragon. He was more thoughtful now, more aware of how strange and wonderful the world could be. He looked at the sky more often, always searching. Then one evening, as the sun was setting, he heard a sound that made his heart leap. A roar, but not threatening, excited. He ran outside and looked up. There, circling his ranch, was the dragon. It was bigger now, much bigger, almost half the size of its mother. But he recognized it immediately by the pattern of its scales and the way it flew. The dragon landed in the yard with a thump that rattled the windows. It folded its wings and looked at Jake with those amber eyes he remembered so well. Then it made that trilling sound, the greeting sound, and Jake felt tears prick his eyes. "You came back," he said, walking forward slowly. "You actually came back." The dragon lowered its head, and Jake put his hand on its snout, just like he used to. The scales were warmer than he remembered, harder. This was no baby anymore, but a young adult, powerful and dangerous. But it was still his dragon, the one he had saved and cared for. They stayed like that for a moment, reconnecting. Then the dragon pulled back and made another sound. Jake turned and saw something that made him gasp. The sky was full of dragons, 6, 7, 8 of them, circling high above. The mother dragon and the red one were there, along with others he did not recognize. They were all watching. The young dragon made another sound, and suddenly Jake understood. It had brought them here. It had told them about the human who helped it, and they had come to see for themselves, maybe to say thank you in their own way. One by one, the dragons descended and landed at a respectful distance from the ranch. The mother dragon came closest. She looked at Jake again with that intense gaze, and then she did something remarkable. She opened her mouth, and a small object fell out. It rolled across the ground and stopped at Jake's feet. He bent down and picked it up. It was a stone, but unlike any stone he had ever seen. It was smooth and round and seemed to glow with an inner light. It was warm in his hand, and he felt a strange energy coming from it. Dragon gift, he thought, a treasure from their hoards. "Thank you," he said, looking at the mother dragon. "I do not know what this is, but thank you." The mother dragon made a sound that might have been approval. Then, one by one, the dragons took off again. The young dragon stayed a moment longer, touching its head to Jake's one more time. Then it too spread its wings and launched into the air. They flew in a formation, majestic and beautiful, circling the ranch 3 times before heading north again. Jake watched them go, holding the glowing stone in his hand. He did not feel sad this time. He knew now that the dragon would come back. Maybe not often, but sometimes, when it could. And that was enough. That night, Jake sat on his porch with the stone on the table beside him. It cast a gentle light that pushed back the darkness. He thought about all the stories he had heard about dragons, about how they were dangerous and greedy and cruel. None of those stories matched what he had experienced. The dragons he had met were intelligent and capable of gratitude. They valued loyalty and kindness. Maybe humans had it wrong about a lot of things, Jake thought. Maybe the world was stranger and more wonderful than anyone realized. Maybe there were more impossible things out there waiting to be discovered, if only people kept their eyes open and their hearts willing to help. He thought about the cowboy code he had always lived by. Help those who need help. Show kindness to all creatures. Keep your promises. It had served him well with horses and cattle. It had served him just as well with a dragon. Maybe those old values, simple as they were really all anyone needed. The stone pulsed gently beside him, a reminder of the bond between a lonely cowboy and a frightened baby dragon. A bond that had changed both of their lives in ways neither could have predicted. Jake picked up the stone and held it, feeling its warmth spread through his hand. "Thank you too," he said to the empty air, to the dragons somewhere far away, "for trusting me, for coming back." The stone glowed brighter for just a moment, as if in response. Jake smiled. The ranch did not feel quite so lonely anymore. He had a connection now to something greater than himself, to creatures of legend and wonder. And he knew that as long as he held true to his values, as long as he was willing to help those in need regardless of what they were, his life would never be ordinary again. The stars wheeled overhead in their eternal dance. The wind whispered across the plains, carrying the scent of sage and distant rain. And somewhere out there, dragons flew beneath the moon, free and wild and magnificent. Jake sat on his porch and watched the night, content in a way he had never been before. He had found his purpose in an unexpected place, in the weak cry of a baby dragon calling for its mother in a dust storm. And he would never forget it.